moderator on behalf of UNUMI Prep team. Our speaker today is Laura Wray, who has extensive experience preparing candidates for taking the English exams. She's going to talk about the differences between the two tests and give you valuable advice how to prepare and achieve a higher score. If you have any questions, please type them in the Q&A box, and she will take time to answer at the end of the session. If you have problems with the sound on presentation, you can switch to Zoom app by clicking the button on the left corner of your screen. I hope you enjoyed today's presentation, and I'm giving the floor to Laura now.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining the webinar today. I'll be speaking about TOEFL and IELTS. I've been prepping thousands of students in the last 12 years, and so I think I have a couple of insights that you could find useful to decide whether the TOEFL or the IELTS is better for you, and also to decide whether you want to prepare by yourself or taking a course with a better knowledge. So we do prepare courses also for GMAT, TOEFL, and IELTS, and the mission for application. So we have a wide experience about what schools want in terms of exams and scores, etc. So let's say TOEFL or IELTS. If you're applying for a master in MBA, or you want to study overseas in an English-speaking country, you're probably going to have to take one or the other. Sometimes schools they all accept TOEFL, IELTS in principle. Some schools kind of prefer one test over the other one. They will not tell you, but you will understand from the scores that they'll ask you. So let's go and see. Briefly, some of you may be familiar with this, some of you may not. So I'm going to give you a very quick overview of the tests. The IELTS is designed by British Council, IDP IELTS Education Australia, and University of Cambridge. The accents you will hear in the IELTS are different. English, Scottish, Australia, USA, and you will also have some foreigners, New Zealand, Irish, you name it. The cost is about 225, 230 euros. The format is in paper. So yes, they give you a piece of paper and a pen to type, to write, or also in some places, they also offer a computer delivered section. The sections are for listening, reading, writing, and speaking. And in the IELTS, doesn't matter if you choose the computer or paper form, the speaking will be always face-to-face with an examiner. With someone who will sit across the table and then will ask you questions. The speaking is not necessarily the same day. So you may take it later in the afternoon or even before you take the other three parts, even 1 week before or 1 week later. So plan very carefully your deadlines. Duration 2.5 hours plus 15 minutes speaking. Score from 0 to 9, but most schools will be happy with 7 or 7.5, the top most excluded scores. TOEFL is American by ETS, Educational Testing Service. The accents are American, period, okay? The cost about 250 euros. This is very standard American with little accents or no accents. The format, you can choose if you want to take it from home, which you cannot do with the IELTS, really. They started with the COVID epidemics, to help people to satisfy their requirements and their deadlines. And now they kept the home edition format. So you basically need a good connection and you can take the test from your own home without going anywhere. Same sections as the IELTS and lasts a little bit longer, maybe, but not too much. The score is from 0 to 120. So what do I choose? To choose between the two, you need to really look carefully at your preferences, your inclinations, also your background, and also you have to look at the score that is required by the universities you're applying to. When I say preference, inclinations means, okay, where did you learn English? Did you learn it in the UK? Did you have a Brit or Australian teacher, or you had an American teacher and you learned the American English? And then also, what are your preferences in terms of test taking? And what are your skills in terms of note taking and paraphrasing, and we'll see that after. And of course the score, because you want to get admitted, so you want to take the test that it's, for you it's better to get the score that you need. So as I said before, you should really consider whether you have been exposed more to US or UK Australian accents. A lot depends on, your travels, where you grew up, who were your teachers. If you spend a lot of time in England versus US versus other countries. And also, um, what do you watch? Do you watch movies? A lot of my students watch series and they watch in the original language. Now, what kind of series or movies do you watch? Do you watch American movies? Do you watch British movies? Do you watch The Crown? Didn't you miss one a single episode of The Crown? Or you're more into American series? So what is that you used to listen to? Because the accents are very different. Then also you have to consider, how is your English spelling? Because in the IELTS, it's probably more important than in the TOEFL, and we'll see why. Also, are you more comfortable with multiple choice questions, or are you more comfortable with blanks, filling, labeling, open end, uh, short summary, filling tables type of questions? Because in the TOEFL, it's basically all multiple choice, A, B, C, D. In the IELTS, you have a different variety of questions. They're very different, very diverse, and they ask you to do many things, okay? They ask you to fill blanks, label pictures, label diagrams. They ask you to fill in tables. So it's all blanks filling basically, but in they come in different shapes and forms. You could prepare alone if you don't want it. I mean, you may think that you can do it alone, depending, of course, on the score you have to get, and depends on your studying level. If you're extremely fluent, well, you don't need a course. You can buy your books and prepare yourself. Uh, Keep in mind that unless you're super fluent, you're not going to have any feedback on speaking and writing. So you're really not improving your language skills. But of course, you can do this if you're very fluent. You buy yourself one of those self-study books. So they give you all the directions. They also give you some, hints and tips on, for example, how to write, get yourself a writing for the TOEFL, writing for the IELTS book, and then you can actually, prepare yourself. You don't have anyone predicting a score, because as you can, if you do self-study, you take your simulations, you can calculate pretty much your reading and listening score, but there's nobody's going to predict what you're going to be scoring in writing or speaking. You have to consider that. So if you have, to score very high, you need to find someone who's going to actually tell you what your level is, because you don't really know. And then it may take a longer preparation time. Again, it depends on the score you have to get. If you're very fluent and you have to score 6 in the IELTS or 80 in the TOEFL, you probably don't need a course. You can do it yourself, okay? With a course, the pros, okay, that you get feedback. Obviously, you improve your language skills. You get a score prediction, because your coach will tell you, okay, you should be around this, more or less, this score. So if you're not there, you don't waste the money on the test, which is always over 200 euros. And so eventually you save on the cost of the exam. And then generally you prepare faster. And then of course the cost is a cost, because a course is not for free. If it's a good course, it can be expensive. Okay. One thing must be very clear. The length of preparation time and the mode. So whether you study on your own, so you do self-study, or you're taking a course, depends on your language competency level and your score objective. So we get questions from students all the time. How long is it going to take? Am I going to make it to score 7 in 2 months? Am I going to be able to prepare in 3 months to get 7.5, to get 100? Do you think it's possible? I don't know. We don't know, because we don't know what the learning curve is for everyone, and we don't really know, how much time you're willing to put in. So you need to take an assessment before you start to study. or the TOEFL, the IELTS, either you study alone or you planning to take a course, you should always take an assessment so you have an idea where you stand. That's the very beginning, okay? And then decide if to get to your score, you need a course, you need a tutor, you can do it on yourself, and especially how long it's going to take you, okay? So, for example, if you're asked a high score in writing, okay, 7 or better in IELTS, or you asked to 25 or better in TOEFL, for example, being fluent because you watch the series or you chat with your friends in New York or London is really not enough. You must know the rules of English academic composition, college composition, the 5-paragraph structure. You must be familiar. For besides grammar, besides vocabulary, besides the content, there is a formal manner to write an academic essay, and you need to know that. You need to know how to write an introduction, the hook, the thesis statement, supporting ideas, development of body paragraphs, conclusion, etc. These are all parts of a structure. And our experience with the students that are coming from a non-English background, non-English speaking background, is that sometimes they write very differently. They write in a more creative way. In English, the structure is quite rigid, and you need to know what to do. So, how to master the writing section. So, what is the secret to good writing? Well, the secret to good writing, indeed, is reading, reading, reading. The people who write well usually are the people who love to read. Now, read a lot. Read good literature, books, any kind of books that you're interested in. If you're interested in a specific subject, for God's sake, just read that. Newspapers, magazines, try to read a lot of different topics because you will need a lot of vocabulary. Just make sure it's academic level reading, okay? Don't read comics because that's not going to help you. No, like slang, wanna, gonna stuff. No, no, no. This is academic. These are academic tests, and you just can't use certain expressions. You need to know good, proper, stylish, correct English. Okay. In the writing section of both tests, you have 2 tasks. Task 1 and then task 2. In the IELTS, task 1 asks you to describe a graph, a pie chart, a diagram. So make sure that you're familiar with those. Most students who come from, like most students should know, okay, what is a curve, what is a straight line, what is a slope. They should be familiar with X's and Y's and stuff. But some students maybe have forgotten in things, especially if they come from social science or like, different studies. So make sure that you know how to interpret a graph and you understand the pie chart, you understand the bar chart, because then you will have to describe it in detail. And then you need to know how to structure the task 1 essay. And this is strict. You must have an introduction, an overall paragraph describing the trend of the numbers on the graph, a middle paragraph, and a conclusion. And it's strict, and you need to absolutely follow that. Now, it's not enough, obviously, to structure. You also need to have vocabulary and style. You need to, use the correct linking words, but at least make sure that you have a basic structure. Okay. For the TOEFL, in task 1, you need to write a short essay. It is totally different in the TOEFL. Yeah, you must explain. You will read a passage, then you will hear a professor giving a lecture, and you will write an essay explaining the connection between the two. The professor may add information to the reading, may make examples to support the reading, or the professor may also cast doubt on the reading or challenge the reading, criticize it, and you have to explain that. Okay, this is really academic. It tests your ability to basically attend a university course in English, listen to the professor, take notes, read the text, and study and learn. Okay. Also, probably in the TOEFL, you find a wider variety of topics because they really throw in everything. In listening and reading, you'll find zoology, social science, psychology, geology, and many more. So the vocabulary is very varied. In the IELTS, a little bit more limited because you also have a part with daily life. So in that sense, maybe you need less specific vocabulary. These areas are including the test. So make sure that you know how to paraphrase. I will go back to paraphrasing several times because paraphrasing is a basic, essential skill that you'll need in the IELTS and in the TOEFL. Okay, paraphrasing means to express, from a reading to write a summary of this reading, this passage, using different words but expressing the same concept. And this is essential in the IELTS when you do the listening part, because they will be really come in handy, and in the TOEFL when you do the speaking and the writing part. So paraphrasing is the skill that you must possess. Doesn't matter which of the two tests you're going to choose. That is absolutely a must. For the task two, both tests in the writing, you need to make sure that you're familiar with the 5 paragraphs structure. Introduction with the hook, thesis statement, overview, reasoning, each following paragraph developing reasoning with supporting details and examples. Spelling. How important is spelling? Well, spelling is very important in the IELTS because in the listening part, you will have to fill in the blanks with words as you hear them. And if you misspell a word, that will be counted as a mistake. I personally think it's not very fair, okay? Because maybe you have understood clearly what they are saying, okay? But you just miss just one letter because you're in a hurry, because you're stressed. Well, they will count it as a wrong answer. So if you misspell tourist, you understand the word tourist perfectly. You say, they're talking about traveling and you heard the word tourist, but you spell, instead of spelling T-O-U-R, you spell T-U-R. Well, sorry, that is wrong. And so make sure that you spell correctly. So check your spelling skills. If you're a very good speller, then, the IELTS could go, okay? But if you're not very good at spelling, the TOEFL is much less important because everything is multiple choice except for the writing. And in the writing, little spelling mistake here and there is kind of tolerated. So you shouldn't worry too much about the spelling there. For the listening parts, we have listening strategies. I have a little picture here of one of the many questions that you find in the IELTS. This is labeling a diagram. They love to give you pictures of strange machines, and you will hear a speaker describing the machine, and you will have to fill in the blanks with the word as the speaker has pronounced it. The difficulty in this type of test is that you need to understand what the machine is. I mean, for example, this is what, a panel, I don't know, solar heater, black surface, radiation from the sun, glass. Yeah, must be some solar panel. But some machines are more complicated than others. So, if you're mechanically engineering inclined, this is probably going to be fun. If you're not, it's going to be a little bit more difficult. Other questions in the IELTS ask you to fill in blanks. You have a summary of a speech with some blanks, and you will have to fill in the blanks with the words as you heard them from the conversation or the lecture. How do we make sure that we get the right words to put in the right place? Well, you should make sure you take advantage of the time they give you before you start the test to scan the questions, because they let you have some time to look at the questions beforehand in the IELTS. And so you can try to predict what kind of word you should type in the blank, a noun, a number, an adjective. And also you could, get an idea of the topic of the conversation or the topic of the lecture. And also when you are listening, while you are listening, you should always keep your eyes, do not distract yourself. Keep your eyes on the question as you hear, and as you hear, okay, the word, the right word that fits right there. So you need to be able to instantly paraphrase what you hear and recognize it in the written part so that you can grab the word and write it right there as you're listening. Because if you try to do that later, you don't have enough time. Remember, you can only listen once. So I think that the listening part in the IELTS is not that easy, honestly. As I said before, you'll hear some accents and some of them are thick, heavy. So you need to be familiar with them. Important, paraphrasing. It's an essential skill. In the TOEFL, you will not see the questions before. Absolutely. You first hear the conversation or the lecture, and then you start getting the questions one by one. But they're all multiple choice. So in these, for the TOEFL listening, all you have to learn how to do is take good notes, write down as much as possible. You need to write down quick all the information as much as you can, because the questions are going to be about everything. They're going to ask you detailed questions, gist questions, so you need to write down as much as possible. In the TOEFL, honestly, with the listening, the skill you need is note taking. That's all you need. For the reading, in strategies, well, paraphrasing in the IELTS is essential, because also in the reading, you will have to answer, you have the very similar questions to the listening. You have to answer questions that ask you to fill in blanks, diagrams, tables, and summaries, okay? So if you are able to paraphrase and identify the main points of the paragraphs, then you shouldn't have many problems. Now, one thing about the IELTS, which is important, and you cannot do that with the TOEFL. When you do the reading in the IELTS, you can, so do it. Go and look at the question carefully. Based on the questions that you find in that section, you will choose a different reading strategy. For example, if you have to complete a diagram, just scan and then start reading carefully from the point where they start the description of whatever the sequence of events is. If you have like a summary to fill in with, with blanks that you have to fill in, you need to read everything. And you need to understand the main points, because the summary will summarize the main points of the. So sometimes you have to read all the passage and try to identify the main points. Sometimes you only read parts of the passage and you kind of like scan quickly the other parts. It all depends on the type of questions you have in the reading. You have 3 readings and you have a total of 40 questions. So you have a good variety, a good mix. And, some, at least one reading will have headlines questions. So at least one reading, you will have to read carefully each paragraph and identify the main point of each paragraph. For the other 2 readings, you probably can skim parts of the reading depending on the questions that you have. In the TOEFL, note taking crucial. Okay, as it is for the listening, also in the TOEFL, note taking is the most important skill you need. Because TOEFL, as I said before, it's all multiple choice. You don't have to fill in anything, no blanks, no nothing. Start reading, taking notes of the main points of each paragraph, because you have questions about main points of each paragraph and details about the paragraphs, and try to make sure that you take very clear notes so that you understand your own writing. But again, identifying main points of the paragraph and taking good notes is essential. If you read well, you can answer very fast. If you don't read well, then it becomes difficult. Okay, so the number of questions are approximately the same in the IELTS and the TOEFL in the reading part. But again, They're very different questions because in the TOEFL it's only multiple choice. So, okay. And then we have the speaking. The speaking is probably what scares most people. If we have to look at the two different tests, I would say that maybe the IELTS is a little bit easier. Why? Because in the IELTS, you will speak with someone, I mean, someone will ask you a question. And they start with personal questions. And then they ask you to describe, they give you a piece of paper with some questions on it, and they give you time to answer. And then they ask you questions about social issues generally. What do you think about global warming, or how would you fix global warming? Do you think the internet will replace the press one day, the printer press, this kind of. So you need to have good vocabulary. You have to be able to use good connectors. You have to make a logic speech with a good content. But if you're fluent already, practice with some sample questions, record yourself, listen to yourself. I think it should be fine. If you're not fluent, that is a different story. You need to improve your language skills. But in the TOEFL, the speaking part is definitely a little bit more difficult. And in the first part, it's similar to the IELTS because you have to speak about not about yourself really, but they ask your opinion of an issue or your preference. Like, do you prefer to eat at a restaurant or to cook at home? Or do you think that children spend too much time in front of the TV today? And so you have to explain. Now, the difference is that in the IELTS, they don't give you a time limit. Well, if you keep talking and talking and talking nonstop, at one point the examiner will cut you off. But you don't have a strict time. In the TOEFL, you do have 15 seconds to prepare this first question, and then you need to speak for 45 seconds. So it's strictly timed. So for this speaking part, the TOEFL needs to be really, really practiced a lot, because it's not really knowing how to what to say and how to say it. That is making sure that you say that in the right amount of time, in the amount of time they're asking you, to use, no more than 45 seconds. And the second part is very different because it includes reading a short passage and then listening to a lecture, and then you speak about the relations between the two. It's like the writing. The only difference is that you're speaking and you have to give your response in the maximum time of 60 seconds. Okay, so here we have two skills that are essential. Taking very quick notes, because the passage that they give you 45 seconds to read the short reading passage, at the end disappears and never comes back. And so you need to write down as much as possible in 45 seconds. And also, it's important to know how to paraphrase, because that would be much easier for you. If you're good at paraphrasing when you read your passage, like when you do the writing, it will be, faster and better. So this part is a little bit challenging, and you really need to practice a lot. It's not a simple conversation or speaking about, the weather. What did you do last winter, last summer? What do you do on weekends? Which is what they ask you in the first part of the IELTS. So it's so now, which of the two is best for me? Now, as I said in the beginning, it depends on the score you must achieve and whether you have a minimum score in each section or an overall score. For example, some schools ask for an overall of, for example, 7 in the IELTS, period. Or they ask for an overall of 90 or 100 in a TOEFL, period. Some schools ask, and some programs ask for a overall of 7 in the IELTS, for example, with a minimum of 6.5 in each section, or a minimum of 6.0 in reading and listening, and 6.5 in speaking and writing, or 6.5 in reading and depending. So you need to be very careful and combine all these things so that you decide what is easier for you to get. Sometimes students ask me, what should I take? And I say, well, what score do you have to get? Besides going through the assessments and the accent, how familiar you are with the accent. Do you watch American series? Do you like multiple choice? Do you like filling in blanks? How is your spelling? All these questions. I mean, like, you have to have an answer to these questions before you decide, because this is very important. So for example, if you have to get an overall 7 in the IELTS and they ask you minimum 6 or 6.5 in each section, then it's probably better to take the IELTS. If they ask you to score 100 with a minimum of 25, because 7 is more or less equal to 100. But it's very tough to get 25 in speaking. But to get 6 in speaking or 6.5 is not that difficult. 6.5, you got to be fairly fluent, but 6 is feasible, even if you're not, a C2, okay? On the other side, if they ask you to score 100 in the TOEFL with no minimum, and they ask you an overall 7 in the IELTS with a minimum of 7 in writing or speaking, which I had several students had to score that, then it's easier to take the TOEFL, because in the TOEFL reading and listening, honestly, if you practice a lot and you manage to get to good language skill, good proficiency in terms of vocabulary, etc. Each section is scored from 0 to 30. It's really not that difficult to score 27 or 28. So it depends on how you do in the reading and listening. To get 100 in the TOEFL is really not that difficult if you do well in reading and listening. If you score 56 with the two of those, 44 between speaking and writing is really not that difficult to get. Okay, so you need to know really what all the requirements are. What the requirements are, and it's a decision that can make a difference. Okay, because it's important to get accepted. Is really not only of course the score, the TOEFL score, the IELTS score, but it's your grades and a lot of things. But unfortunately, schools cannot be that flexible on the required score, because if you're going to study in English, you need to show that you have at least the minimum ability, okay, to also another thing you want to check is that if you look at the European frame, they have all these corresponding scores, like but they are not precise. You will not find anyone who will tell you 7 is equal to 100 or B1 is equal to that. It's always a range of scores. Sometimes people come up and say, I need a B2. There is no certificate B2. There is a score that corresponds to a B2, but it's very wide. So you need to check with the school exactly what you mean by a B2. Because if a B2 is from, like, it goes from, I've seen B2s from 72 to 90 in the TOEFL, there's a huge difference between a 90 and a 72. So the school must tell you, B2 TOEFL, does it mean that 72 is fine? Or do you want me to score a midpoint or 90? So they have to tell you, because saying B2 with a TOEFL doesn't mean anything. I can say that for me, a B2 must be 90. And then if you look at the frame, it gives you a range of almost 20 points. So you need to be sure that that is really the score you have to get. And I will stress this again. Consider your level of understanding of the different accents. So you really need to test yourself. If you're not able to distinguish one accent from another one, you may have problems with the IELTS. For example, you have a lot of different accents. You have Scottish. Scottish is very different from British. Then you have Northern British, like you have Scottish, England, Northern England, then you have Ireland, then you have Australia, then you have New Zealand, which is similar to Australia, but it's not quite the same. And then you have South Africa. And they're all different. And sometimes students are maybe used to British, but that's not the standard accent you hear. You hear a lot of British in the IELTS. You also hear American. Okay, but you hear all the other accents, which is very good in one way, because it means that if you understand everything, you're really fluent. But on the other side, sometimes it's difficult for some people if they're not used to. Also, considering nowadays, well, we're finally hopefully getting out of the COVID thing. So maybe there is no longer a need for home testing. But consider, are you far from a test center? Are you, do you have to travel far away to get the test center? Do you have problems with scheduling? Because the home testing option is more flexible, in a sense that you can take the test 4 days a week or 5 days a week, anytime, and you do it from home. If you're going to a test center, there are certain days and you may not close to you. So this is something you may want to consider, as well as your preference. I mean, like, do you prefer to use paper and pen? Then you would take the paper version of the IELTS, or do you prefer to work on a computer? Then you could take the computer version of the IELTS or the TOEFL, which is online. If you don't like the idea of sitting across the table and being questioned by a living human being, because that's what happens in the IELTS, but in the TOEFL, you never see anyone and they don't see you. So it's totally void of bias. The TOEFL, they don't know who you are. They know probably that you're female or male because of the voice, but they have no clue about the candidate. In the IELTS, the examiner actually sees you as in front of you. So whatever, take whatever you want to take out of it, but that's one way to, that's something to consider. If you don't like the idea of speaking to a computer, record your answer, because you don't see anyone. You will hear a voice saying, now listen to a conversation between a student and his advisor. And then you listen to the conversation, then you hear a voice saying, you have 30 seconds to prepare your response. Start speaking after the beep, and then you hear beep, and you start speaking, and then that's the end. So some people just hate to speak to a machine. So maybe you want to take the real test. I mean, not the real test, the test with the real person in front. That's up to you. Depend on your preference. Remember, it's your test. You need to achieve as high as possible. So try to choose the test that puts together the best conditions for you. And also, do you prefer to finish the test the very same day? Or, because in the IELTS, I find this quite annoying actually, but they will not tell you when your speaking test is going to be. When you sign up for the test, they schedule, you schedule your test date, but then the speaking is a question mark. They don't let you know until, sometimes I have students calling us saying, when is my speaking test? I don't know. I still don't know. There's nothing we can do about that, because that's really scamful. Yeah, you need to check with them. But they didn't tell me. They didn't, they don't answer me. I don't know. So they have many students. So they try to accommodate and they schedule, it's unpredictable. You could be scheduled the same day. Okay, later you may have to wait for 2 or 3 hours there, or 5 hours, or whatever it is, depends on what time. I had students taking the exam at 9 in the morning and I had to go back at 5 in the afternoon, or students finishing the exam at 2 or 3 in the afternoon and having the speaking at 5. So or sometimes a schedule on a totally different date. I remember once I had a student who had to take the IELTS, and they scheduled the speaking test 1 week before the rest of the test. And the problem is that he was taking a course, and his course was finishing 2 days before the test. So we had to take the speaking without having completed the course. And that is like strange. Or they schedule the speaking after, and that could be even 1 week after. So when you take the IELTS, if you take the IELTS, make sure you check that, because you have deadlines. And if you get, if you take the speaking test maybe like a week after, then make sure that when you get your result, you're still on time to supply the university with the results. So that's another thing to consider. Okay, so it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. And Okay, I think that's all I had to say for today. So thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. I think it was very interesting, and we heard a lot of good advices. So we received a few questions in the Q&A box, and yeah, let me read you the first one.
Yeah.
Some universities offer their own English exam as an alternative. Do you think it's better to take their exam or stick to IELTS or TOEFL?
Okay, I think it's better to take IELTS or TOEFL, because unless you know that you're only going to apply to that university, and you say, okay, I'm just gonna go there, I'm not gonna go anywhere else. If they don't take me, that's it. I will not take any graduate school, any graduate studies anywhere else. Then it's better to take the IELTS or TOEFL, because they offer you the opportunity to apply everywhere. You can apply in every single country in the world, because all the universities all over will take one or the other one. So it's better to take the IELTS or TOEFL, because if you want to apply to different schools, you just use one test. You don't have to take a test every time you apply. So I would just go for those.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah.
And I think we have a question that's also related to this. Which exam is more prestigious?
There's no exam more prestigious. The TOEFL has more tradition, and is maybe is more academic. I don't want to put the equivalence between prestigious and academic, okay? Because prestigious is a perception of the outside. So what I'm giving is a qualitative evaluation of the test. In the academic IELTS, there is a part in the listening and also in the reading that is not academic. So you will answer questions on day life things. So you hear people talking about booking hotels, making reservations and stuff. In the TOEFL, you have nothing on that. It's just strictly university life and academic life and courses. So in that sense, the TOEFL is more academic. And some schools, for example, some PhD programs prefer the TOEFL. Okay, but for God's sake, I'm not saying it's better or worse. The TOEFL has more tradition, because the TOEFL has been around for, oh my God, long before I was born, and that was a long time ago. So it's been around since ever. And for like, I think for 40 years or more, it was the only test available in the world to attend university in an English-speaking country. So it was used to study in the US, Canada, UK, Australia, New Zealand, any country you spoke English, there was only the TOEFL. Then the IELTS is more recent, because the IELTS has become increasingly popular, but it was launched not longer than 10 years ago. So the TOEFL has a lot of tradition. It's been, yeah, I mean, well, it's a well-established test. The IELTS is very reputable too. So there's really no more procedures. It depends it's a lot up to the school. Okay, the school and the program would probably lean towards one or the other one, and you have to do what they say.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, so there is another question.
Sure.
My mother tongue is French. Do you think for me it's easier to take IELTS or TOEFL? I guess this person is asking if nationality or mother tongue play any role.
Yeah, it doesn't make a difference. It doesn't really make a difference. You need to evaluate your skills. You do some self-evaluation. Spelling is crucial for the IELTS. If you're a good speller, then no problem. If you are not sure about spelling, some people are better spelling than others, let's face it, you know. So even us, it's like I was always a great spelling, winning all the spelling bee things, but some other people, you know, my husband is like terrible in spelling, and he has a master's degree. So if you're not very good at spelling, the IELTS is no. But it has nothing to do with your mother tongue. It's the same thing. If you like
it's about preparation.
Choice, yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So there's another question.
Sure.
I understand English much better than I speak. What to do to improve my speaking? You already spoke about this, but if you can give some strong advice here.
Okay, if you want to improve the speaking, there are many ways, but you basically you need to find someone who will speak English with you, and there's no other way. I mean, you can't improve your speaking by yourself because you need someone to give you feedback. You know, you can't. You can improve your listening if you watch movies. Now, of course, watching movies, watching series, which is a blessing in English, obviously, with English subtitles if you don't understand. Otherwise, it can become boring. So always use subtitles. I didn't mention this, but it's really important to use subtitles if you are missing out too much, because it will help you to put together the sound with the written word. Because one of the problems for foreigners is they don't understand English is because English is spelled differently from what is pronounced. And so if you hear the word and you see it on the screen, then you put the two together and next time you will understand it. So it's really important. And that helps also for speaking, because learning a language is imitation. So you imitate, okay, the speaking. And like when you learn how to speak French or English or whatever from your parents, because you hear them speaking, then you reproduce the sounds and you learn how to speak. That's how we all learn how to speak, because our parents were speaking around us. Okay, so imitation does a lot. But if you want to really improve your speaking, you need to find yourself a speaking partner. And they have, I know in many countries, they organize like this coffee, tea afternoons, coffee, lunch, English speaking coffee, English speaking teas, where people go, they meet native speakers, they want to make new friends. That could be a way. Or watch a lot of movies. There's really no other way to improve your speaking, because you need to have someone who is, it's like playing tennis. You can play by yourself, you just throw the ball against the wall, but you don't learn too much.
Of
Okay.
course.
Yeah,
Okay, thank you. And then we have one last question.
sure.
TOEFL gives you an option to send score to 4 institutions for free. What if
Yeah.
you don't like the score? Can you cancel it before sending? And how do they send the score to the 4 schools? By email.
Okay, you don't have to send the scores. Okay, so okay, you can put in the scores when you sign up. You can put in, I'm sorry, the universities when you sign up. Okay, and then once that you get your test, if you accept your score, because you can refuse the score, you won't send it. Watch out though, because you cannot do this if you take it at the test prep. You have, if you take it from home, the test center. If you take it from home, you will see the reading and listening score before, right away at the end of the test. And you will get the rest afterwards. But if you go to the test prep, you don't see it. Unless they change it. Now with the home edition, they have changed a little thing, but you don't see it. So there's nothing you can do. If you don't like it, that's too bad. So if you are not sure, this is why I always tell my students, go when you're sure you get the score. You will, if you take it over, you will only send the highest score. So don't worry. It's not like you take the test, immediately goes out. Okay. You can put in the scores you want the test to set to, but you have the option to set the highest score. So they don't see your low score. Okay. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I think it was very useful for our audience. Thank you everyone for joining us today. That's all. I wish you a lot of luck in taking the exams.
Yeah.
Whatever you choose. Thank you,
Okay.
Laura.
Yep. Okay. Goodbye, everyone.